Hi friends, David here from Learn Stage Lighting, and today we're going to talk about what lighting console should I choose for my church's lighting, how to figure that out, how to find the right console or software for your needs so that you can make great services with it. Let's dive in. Okay, so we have a previous video that you definitely want to watch before this that goes over really what I look at and what we look at with really 10 years of just being in the trenches, over 10 years, in helping people find the right lighting console or control solution for their needs. We've used everything we've learned over that time to come up with this and have some new, awesome, really great picks for you here. And so in this video, I want to take where we stopped at the end of that video and really apply it directly to church lighting. Okay, so just as an example here, the first console we had looked at was the WMX1 from ADJ. And this is a really cool little console. Apologize here, I'm just going to zoom it in a little bit on our camera. This is a really cool little console just simply because it is completely standalone, completely free of a PC. And so I think for churches where your lighting is fairly simple, you're not doing a lot of complicated stuff, and you want something that's pretty easy to learn and still can do some interesting stuff, the WMX1 can really be a really key, really nice console for you. It does the basics well. So just to give you some foresight into how it works, say for example, you have a church and you have a stage front wash for your band that's white, and you have a preaching front wash with some other fixtures. In that case, you could simply go and grab yourself a MIDI controller like we have here, okay? And then you're actually going to have control of your different groups of lights. You can see I'm bringing up the intensity on these different faders. Okay, so say groups 1 and 2 are your front washes, and then the other stuff 3, 4, 5 through 8 can be any other combination of different fixtures that are backlight on your walls, on the cross, house lighting, etc. Basically what you do, and the way to make this console work for church lighting, is you go ahead and inside of this console, you go with your different groups and you adjust your colors, okay? You adjust positions of any moving lights. You adjust gobos if your lights have gobos. And then in the live edit, you can go and adjust actual individual DMX channels that may be outside of the regular stuff we already talked about. Then, if you want to apply any effects, you can build them and apply them. When you get what you like and what really looks great, you just go to the preset page, you'll shift, store to a new preset, and then you're able to switch between these different presets during your service and either have someone, a volunteer, pressing these buttons. You can name them accordingly. So like walk in, music, announcements and preaching, things like that. And someone can quickly follow along. The bigger advantage, though, comes in if you can trigger this off of a external source, such as ProPresenter or Proclaim, two really popular slide programs, okay? If you've got those, then you can actually go into the edit mode, and here we have an option for MIDI. Now here I have a MIDI controller connected, but if instead of a MIDI controller connected, you just set up these presets, lights up and down and all sorts of different things. You just set up these presets for the parts of your service. You can then shift and click down this MIDI encoder, press a button or send a command from your ProPresenter or Proclaim, okay? It would come out of your computer on a MIDI to USB device and then come into the Wolf Mix on a separate one. That's about, at the time of this recording, about $60 worth of hardware to get the MIDI from the computer into this console, okay? Now it's mapped. And so now I'll just press that again. And now if I go ahead and press this first preset and then fire this one, it changes the lights, it changes the preset that I'm in. You can see that again, and makes it fire. And so even though these Wolf Mix, these WMX1 consoles from ADJ seem really simplistic and they are geared towards, essentially DJs, I would argue that in a lot of churches where you don't do a ton with your lighting, it's really a great fit, and it keeps you from relying on a PC. It keeps you from having a PC software that, could go out of date, get hit with viruses, whatever. System updates, just keeps that completely clean. Okay. The next console we look at is the ADJ MyDMX5. I hated previous versions of MyDMX. I really did not like them, but MyDMX5 is surprisingly different, and there's a few big advantages. Number one is you can send scenes that are in the software to these different buttons. Okay. And so you can have this powered up by USB-C and then connect it to your computer via Ethernet. And when the computer's not on and you're not doing a service, or maybe you're just doing a funeral or some other type of function where you really don't need full lighting control, you could just have someone press these buttons, label them, and get 10 different scenes. Actually, a lot more because there's a bunch of pages. I like to stick to one page though. It's a lot simpler. Okay, let's hop over to the computer and look in the software a little bit at why you might choose something like MyDMX5 over the other options. All right, so I'm here in MyDMX5, and what we're going to look at here is some nuances basically on how to use it in a church setting. If you haven't already checked out the review that we've done on it over on the Gear channel, we'll link to that here and probably on the screen and definitely below as well. So in essence, this works a lot like a lot of other lighting controllers. Some highlights that I have for it are that down here at the bottom where you select lights and control the different attributes, you can actually map these buttons and the appropriate faders in the order that they come in to a MIDI controller. And I show that in the review. It's really powerful and really helps you program things quickly without a ton of extra cost. Okay, so we walk through that there. In terms of programming and kind of layout for a church, that's one of the nice things about this software is essentially I've got this show file set up as a just kind of basic like hunt page, as we call it, where you run things live and on the fly. Basically, I have all these different colors that are across my rig. And I got to turn them on with this little intensity that I had. So I have all these different colors across the lighting rig and, these different lights, and I can turn them on. Some of them, as you can see, I've set with fade times, but I've also illustrated here that you don't have to have fade times. And you're able to basically kind of select things on the fly as you wish. But what's cool about this is that there's also this one called Super Scene over here. And so if I go over that and this toggles my edit, this plays it, I actually have a timeline that I can put different cues on. So in this instance, it really just is simply some different cues here between red. It technically fades out a little at the end, and the other lights also being red. But this basically allows me to trigger multiple of my kind of Lego brick cues as one thing. Then I can go ahead and bring up my MIDI mapping, okay, this one, and I could fire MIDI from an external source. So I can still have my MIDI controller plugged in, doing my faders, and I can send a command from ProPresenter or from Proclaim, either on the same computer or over a network, to fire MIDI for the different parts of the service. And so that really makes it so that you don't really need an operator during the service, or if you have somebody operating lights, they're able to be more focused on matching the mood of the music with some different effects and with kind of adding to it. And the actual main cues, like for each song or each part of the service, will get fired externally. They don't have to worry about that. So we really like that. MyDMX also offers the ability to basically have these banks here. They're essentially like a standard cue list in a typical lighting console, where I can just stack up a bunch of cues and then just go through them, one to the other, and then it'll loop back to the front. So if you have a more traditional type setup and you want to basically move these around or use them essentially as a cue list where somebody's just going to hit play right through it, they can do that. This play key can be made on the touchscreen should be able to be made as a bigger play key, but it also can be assigned to a MIDI controller where somebody just hits the button to advance the lighting. Of course, I'm a big fan of doing things externally, but essentially MyDMX, though it's stronger, I would say, in the kind of running things on the fly method, you totally can combine multiple cues together into bigger cues and then fire those over MIDI or have an operator fire those with your service, either on the screen or with an external MIDI controller. And that's kind of why we like it. That, and like we mentioned, on the hardware itself, you are able to go ahead and actually assign to those 10 buttons different scenes for use when you're not using the full software. So Mac and PC. Now, over to the Mac. Ta-da-da-ba-da. Over here, we have Lightkey. So Lightkey has, for a good period of time, been a favorite of ours, and it still is a good piece of software. It has a lot of similarities to the MyDMX software. Some things are just handled a little bit differently. Overall, they're really evenly matched. What we've always liked about Lightkey is essentially the whole setup process, from basically from setting up your DMX to patching your lights, which happens after the setup wizard. You can go ahead and do it right here. Okay, so patching your universe, patching your lights, all of these things, it basically walks you through a wizard, including actually setting up your moving lights and making sure that they point the same way in the preview on screen as they do in real life. It's really cool how easy it is to set up through their wizard. It also takes external MIDI commands really well, especially if you use Ableton Live. And we have a video with the band We3 from back in 2020, where we actually walked them through on some Zoom calls how to set this up. And they made a really complex show, all triggered from Ableton. If you're not using Ableton, though, I would say it's pretty evenly matched with MyDMX5. And Lightkey is a recurring subscription, whereas MyDMX5 is a one-time purchase that includes the DMX box. Lightkey, you've got to get an external one. Okay, so then the next question is, so we've got these two kind of evenly matched consoles on, on, either level, right? Where you've kind of got MyDMX 5 and Lightkey, not MyDMX 3, not any other variation, MyDMX 5, and Lightkey. And so then the question becomes, okay, like, what happens if we look at this and say, you know what, that's still a little simplistic for me. Maybe I have a lot of lights, or I just do a lot of programming. And you know what, having the ability to have some more advanced features might be helpful. That's when it's time to step up to a professional grade lighting console. So we like Onyx a lot here. There's a few reasons why we love it. The one is the financial aspect. It, compared to other similar consoles on the market, tends to be a little bit less expensive. And one of the ways they do that, one of the ways it can actually be a lot less expensive, is that they have a lot of different price points, from totally PC all the way to totally console, to their largest console, and everywhere in between. Okay. And, when it comes down to it, being in the PC can be great. It looks like this and can work really well in certain situations. But having the tools that are on a console, like we've got that NX4 behind us, if you do a lot of programming, having a physical NX1, NX2, or NX4 console at the time of this recording can make your life a lot easier and save you hours every week, which in turn, if you're on staff, is time. If you're a volunteer, of course, you can't really equate that time into dollars quite as well. And I totally understand that math there. So let's talk about it. So what does a pro grade console like Onyx do that some of these intermediate level consoles like Lightkey or MyDMX wouldn't do? One thing is, when you get to large numbers of fixtures, like I say, like over about 50 fixtures, that's a good point. These intermediate to basic level software or consoles, they just aren't built to handle that many type of fixtures. Can they? Yes, but the programming becomes more clunky. It gets more difficult to access all the things you're trying to access, etc. That's where having a pro grade console makes a lot of sense. The others is that when you have hardware like, the Onyx hardware, like the NX4, I've got behind me an NX1 and an NX2, even the wings like the NXP with the K put together, the controls are directly connected to the console. So instead of like a MIDI controller where you kind of are trying to label some stuff well and whatnot, like having that direct connection means that, there's a label on the keys, it's laid out exactly the way that the console is laid out on the screen, and everything just works a little bit more fluidly. Okay, so that can be a huge plus there. Other big pluses are sections like the presets. So presets, or palettes as other consoles call them in Onyx, are essentially where you can take some lights or a group of lights and apply something like a color, like a position to them. And you say, okay, that's great, David. But I mean, there's kind of workarounds in things like Lightkey or MyDMX. But the thing that those softwares don't do well is when I need to change this. So if I need to update this lead singer preset to a new position and I've used this preset in like 150 different cues, then in a lot of the lower level software, almost all of them, you would just have to reprogram all those cues. In a professional grade console like Onyx, if you reworked your set design, move some lights around, need to update this position, you just update this one position, and every cue that was built with that position preset or palette, it gets updated instantly. And so that's a huge advantage for, especially for positions, colors, but even gobos and things like Zoom can really be benefit. It can be a huge benefit to have presets and be able to program with them. Another big one is pixel mapping. So Onyx has the dialless pixel mapper built in, and we've done lots of tutorials on it. But essentially, it just gives you the ability to grab a piece of media, play it on your lights, and have that happen dynamically. Now, I've got some other parameters on these lights here, which is why you're not seeing the media through, but the media just organically plays on your lighting and can even affect attributes besides just color and intensity. So that can be a huge advantage in creating really interesting stuff, especially if you're using a live operator actually operating the software or console during the service. The third last really big feature in my mind that would set something like Onyx apart from the ones below it are that, having the ability to do what's called cloning can be a huge help. This is where if you get new lights or you just, switch out some lights that are on your stage for different lights, being able to basically copy all the programming over and have a really good starting point is called cloning. It's something that the intermediate or entry level consoles really don't do well. Like the WMX kind of does it in a cool way, but it's fairly limited. To really have that full control and save yourself hours and hours of programming time when you add in new fixtures, even if it's just some stuff you're renting like for Christmas or Easter, to be able to just clone that in about 5 minutes or less and then have all your programming copied over as a great starting point can save you tons and tons of time. So Onyx, in a pro grade console, like it's going to have a higher learning curve. It's going to take more time for someone who hasn't worked with lighting before to be able to really understand that. And so you've got to weigh that out. But if you do a lot of programming, if you do a lot of special events, if you change your set designs around a lot, it's definitely worth the learning curve and the time to learn something more professional grade. Okay, so I hope that helps you today. Really get some more inspiration and just understanding about how to choose a lighting console for church lighting. The last thing I would say about Onyx is, it is more geared towards an operator run service. So bringing in things like MIDI triggers to fire cues, while it can be done from Presenter Proclaim, etc., it's not quite as fluid as the intermediate level software. It's just not. And so that's something to be aware of as well. With that, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this has helped you learn a little bit better what you might want for controlling your lighting at your church. Maybe you've got something that really doesn't work well for you. Maybe you just are starting from scratch. Maybe you're trying to upgrade something that's going to work better. We love to help at aboveavl.com. The owners are, us at Word Stage Lighting. That's me. We love to help people with consoles, finding the right lights for your space, and packaging it together into a quote so that you can get the stuff you need at your personalized price. That sounds good. Head over to Above AVL, either add some stuff to your cart and request a quote, or just use the contact us page to contact us. We love to help people find out exactly what you need, quote it out, totally free, no obligation, and then have the ability to help you get that stuff at your personalized price. If that sounds good, we'll see you guys there. Thanks.